Hello, welcome to the channel. Today we are going to talk about one of the most common and effective ways to obtain permanent residence in Brazil, through a marriage to a Brazilian citizen. Brazilian immigration law allows foreign nationals who are legally married to a Brazilian citizen to apply for permanent residency. This path is part of what's called family-reunification visa and is recognized and protected by the Brazilian immigration law. Let's break down step by step. First, this applies to both heterosexual and same-sex marriage. Brazil recognizes same-sex marriage at the federal level, and the immigration process is exactly the same regardless of the gender of the spouses. There are two main situations where this kind of residence application might happen. The first is when the couple is already living in Brazil. The second is when the Brazilian citizen is living abroad and the foreign spouse wants to move to Brazil. In both cases, the foreign spouse has the right to apply for residence based on the marital relationship. Now, let's go through the requirements. To qualify for permanent residency through marriage, you must first have a valid marriage certificate. If you got married in Brazil, this will be a Brazilian marriage certificate. If you got married abroad, the certificate must be registered with a Brazilian consulate or transferred to the Brazilian Civil Registry. If you are not officially married but are in a stable union, Brazil allows also permanent residence based on recognized common law partnership, called União Estável. This requires a legal declaration registered in Brazil and documentation showing you living together as a couple and share responsibilities. Now, once the marriage or union is recognized, the foreign spouse can apply for residence at the nearest federal police office. If you are outside Brazil, the process can start at Brazilian consulate in your country. Let's talk about the documentation required. Typically, the foreign spouse will need a valid passport, the Brazilian marriage certificate or stable union document, proof of address in Brazil, background checks from the home country and from Brazil, documents showing the couple relationship is genuine, such as photos, travel records, joint accounts, or lease agreements. In some cases, proof of financial support may also be required. The process is very straightforward, but it's important to make sure all documents are translated, notarized, and legalized according to Brazilian requirements. Now, let's move on to the timeline. After submitting the application, the foreign spouse may receive a temporary residence while the process is finalized. In most cases, the foreigner receives a 2-year conditional residency. This is meant to confirm that the marriage is genuine and ongoing. After 2 years, the couple must appear again at the federal police and request the transformation of the temporary residence into permanent residence. They must prove that the marriage is still valid and that the relationship is real. This is known as the 2-year conditional period, and it helps prevent fraudulent marriage for immigration purposes. However, if the marriage ends with those 2 years, the foreigner may lose their status unless they have children or other strong legal ties in Brazil. Once permanent residence is granted, the foreign spouse receives a foreign ID card known as CRNM. This allows them to live, work, open businesses, travel in and out of Brazil, and access public services like healthcare and education. Now, let's look at some frequently asked questions. First, do you need to live in Brazil during the 2-year period? It's highly recommended that you do. If you leave Brazil for long periods or cannot prove that the relationship is ongoing, the federal police may deny your request for permanent status. However, short trips or periods abroad are usually acceptable if properly documented. Second, what if you have a child? If the couple has a Brazilian child, the foreign parent must apply directly for permanent residence without needing a 2-year conditional period. This is because Brazil places a high value on family unity, especially where children are involved. Third, what if we separate after become a permanent resident? Once you have received full permanent residence, that is, after the 2-year period has passed and your status has been confirmed, your legal status in Brazil remains valid even if the marriage ends. Of course, if fraud is discovered, authorities may review your case, but divorce alone doesn't cancel permanent residency. Another question is, can I apply for Brazilian citizenship? Yes, you can. After only 1 year of permanent residence based on marriage, the foreign spouse becomes eligible to apply for naturalization, as long as the marriage is still valid and the couple continues to live together. This is a much faster timeline than the usual 4 years required for the other types of residence. Now, let's talk about some common mistakes people make. One big mistake is submitting incomplete documentation. Every form, every certificate, every translation must be in order. Another common issue is failing to follow up after 2 years. If you don't apply to convert your temporary residence to permanent status, your legal stay may lapse. A third mistake is assuming that marriage alone guarantees approval. The government checks for evidence of a real, committed relationship. If you are living apart or cannot demonstrate that you are truly together as a couple, your application may be delayed or even denied. So, what should you do to increase your chances of success? First, prepare thoroughly. Gather all your documents in advance and make sure everything is translated and notarized according to Brazilian rules. Second, build a file that shows your life as couple. This could include shared bills, photos, trips, social media posts, bank accounts, or affidavits from friends and family. The more evidence you have, the better. Third, attend your federal police appointment together and be ready to answer questions about your life as a couple. And finally, considering working with a Brazilian immigration lawyer. A qualified lawyer can guide you through the process, help you avoid mistakes, and make sure everything is done correctly from the start.